Hello, greetings from beautiful Hawaii. I just love this place. The land is beautiful, the people are friendly, the weather is perfect, and the surfing is terrific. But my favorite part about Hawaii is the volcanoes. If you like volcanoes, and all geologists do, you are going to love Hawaii and you're going to love today's lesson. Today's lesson is called The Earth Inside Out, Part 3. During our last two lessons, we journeyed into the Earth to learn about the Earth's different layers. We've talked about the outer layer, the crust, the mantle, where most of the Earth's rock is, the outer core, and the extremely hot inner core. We've also talked about how the forces of heat, pressure, and time are so important to understanding how the Earth changes. Today we'll talk more about how heat and pressure inside the Earth reshape the outer layer of the Earth's surface on the crust. In particular, we'll be talking about how heat and pressure create landforms like volcanoes and geysers. We'll even visit two of these landforms, Mount St. Helens, a volcano found in Washington State, and Old Faithful, a geyser in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. But before we get to the continental United States, let's start out in beautiful Hawaii. Without volcanoes, this island paradise would not exist. When most people think of volcanoes, they think of the top blowing off of a mountain and lava flowing out everywhere. Volcanic activity actually comes in many different forms, not all of which are as spectacular as a mountaintop eruption. Hawaii is made up of 8 major islands, 7 of which are inhabited or have people living on them. The islands of Hawaii were formed by volcanic activity. In other words, if it weren't for volcanoes, Hawaii would not be there at all. Hawaii is one of the best-known volcanic hotspots in the world. A hotspot is a place where there has been continuous volcanic activity for a long time. In Hawaii's case, the volcanic activity started underwater. In fact, most volcanic activity occurs underwater, deep down near the ocean floor. Down there, the crust is fairly thin, so it's easier for magma to seep up from the mantle. When a volcano erupts underwater, the lava that it releases cools very quickly. Over time, millions of years, this lava piles up. That is what happened in Hawaii. Over time, the lava continually erupting from the hotspot built up a pile that now reaches from the deep ocean floor all the way to the ocean surface, where it became new, dry land. Hawaiian volcanoes erupt gradually, or little by little. The lava bubbles and gurgles and sputters, rather than shooting out of the earth all at once. There is still plenty of volcanic activity on some Hawaiian islands, which means that the island chain is still growing. Now let's compare the Hawaiian volcanoes to another type of volcano, the kind where a mountaintop explodes. This volcano erupted in Washington State, on the west coast of the United States. This is what Mount St. Helens looked like until the year 1980. Mount St. Helens proves that it is generally fairly easy to predict where a volcano will erupt. The hard part is figuring out when. Mount St. Helens has erupted many times over the course of 40,000 or so years, and during this time, the mountain's size and shape has changed. Magma is constantly building up within Mount St. Helens. Unlike the magma in the Hawaiian volcanoes, however, the magma in this area is much stickier than the magma in Hawaii. So it does not gurgle and sputter up through little vents. Instead, the magma gets stuck. An incredible pressure builds up within the mountain. Eventually, the pressure becomes so intense that the mountain cannot hold it anymore, and boom! The eruption of Mount St. Helens was the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. Hundreds of homes were destroyed and thousands of acres of forest were leveled when this mighty volcano erupted. In an instant, the top and one side of the mountain were literally blown away. Lava was not the main problem. Without Mount St. Helens, rather, it was an immense amount of rock and ash that exploded into the air, as well as the landslides that followed as the mountain came crashing down into the valley below. This is what Mount St. Helens looks like today. It's still tall enough to rise above the clouds, but if you compare this picture to the first picture you saw, you can see that it is not the same mountain it used to be. Mount St. Helens has erupted several more times after that day in 1980, and it still erupts occasionally to this day. Here is another place in the United States where there is a lot of volcanic activity. This place is called Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone is mostly in Wyoming, with parts of it extending into Idaho and Montana. Yellowstone National Park is home to many interesting and beautiful sights. Like Hawaii, Yellowstone is on top of a hot spot, a place where there is lots of magma close to the surface. In Yellowstone, the magma has stayed underground and has not erupted onto the surface. Yellowstone is famous for its geysers. A geyser is a rare geologic event that occurs when water seeps down through the cracks into the crust and meets up with hot rocks. When the water touches the hot rocks, it turns into steam. As more water seeps in, more steam is created, and pressure begins to build. Eventually, all this heat and pressure forces the steam to find a way back out. As in other types of volcanic activity that you've learned about, this process is caused by the buildup and release of pressure underground. The result is a geyser, steam and water spewing up out of the earth. These particular geysers are relatively small. They spurt and bubble all day long in water pools or springs, which have a pretty bluish-green color created by a certain mineral that collects there. This geyser has a name. It's called Old Faithful. The word faithful means trustworthy or reliable. Old Faithful got its name because you can count on the fact that it is going to erupt several times each day. It is not possible to predict exactly when it will erupt, but it typically blows its lid about every 90 minutes. Old Faithful spews out steam and hot water from anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. It can spew as much as 8,000 gallons of water up to 185 feet in the air. Every day during the summer, when the park is full of visitors, hundreds of people gather around to watch the world's most famous geyser. Although they come in many forms, shapes, and sizes, all volcanoes and geysers have two things in common. They are the Earth's way of releasing heat and pressure from deep underground. And each one tells us a little more about the history of the Earth. And one other thing, all volcanoes and geysers are extremely hot, so always keep a safe distance and admire them from afar.